Hello everyone! Today I'm going to talk about, for INFJs, how do we develop extroverted feeling and extroverted sensing. I guess the way to really develop your functions is to use them a lot. The more you are able to use them, the better you get at using them. And now I've wanted to share with you guys the things that have helped me to develop extroverted feeling and extroverted sensing. The thing with INFJs is that we are still people with strong extroverted feeling. At least for me, that showed itself in I always, at least as long as I can remember, I have understood like social interactions and social cues, body language, people's motivations, and that kind of stuff. I feel like I never had any struggles with receiving information with extroverted feelings, like this extroverted feeling focus on how people are feeling, but I struggled with actually interacting with my environment. So, extroverted feeling is about shared feeling and it's about connection, genuine connection with people. And it can just be about creating a temporary connection with someone. It can even just be a stranger, but then you connected for one moment with this person based on shared feelings. In order to really be focused on extroverted feeling and extroverted sensing, you have to stop focusing on introverted intuition and introverted thinking for a moment. You have to stop focusing on all the abstract things, and you have to start focusing on the real world around you with extroverted sensing. And you have to start focusing on emotions instead of logic. And when it comes to extraversion, being extroverted is about reacting quickly and almost instinctively, without much thinking. Look at anyone who has dominant extroverted sensing. So, ESFPs and ESTPs. Look at them if you want to know what extroversion is really like. They are so in tune with the world around them that they are usually really quick to respond, and they constantly want to get things going. So that's what extroversion is about, kind of not thinking too deeply. So I think for every function there's the possibility to kind of get it into like a flow of using it, where you're just using it all the time, constantly. And for the introverted functions, I guess what you have to do is be completely introverted and not necessarily focused on your environment and being fully connected with your own thoughts instead. Whereas for the extroverted functions, if you want to be like in a flow, you have to be able to focus on your environment without really thinking too much. So for extroverted feeling, in order to get into like a sort of flow, first of all, don't prepare conversations, okay? I know this is a classic mistake that introverts sometimes make, where they will plan out things beforehand, like what they're going to say. And it's not bad to have any maybe general stuff, but don't prepare anything else, okay? Because it's going to ruin the flow of extroversion. Because you're going to be distracted in your head, like, oh, what did I come up with that I was going to say? And then you're going to be distracted in your head and not focused on the other person, and you're going to not be in a flow for being extroverted. And you should not worry that you don't know what to say. You should trust that whenever you're being extroverted, you're going to know what to do, because you're going to be reactive to your environment and you don't need to plan any conversation beforehand. Secondly, for extroverted feeling, so if you want, of course, there are a lot of ways to use any function. You can also use them in unhealthy ways. But if you want to use extroverted feeling in a healthy way and trying to get like really into a flow of using it, then what you should do is, first of all, since it's about connection, right? Be interested in the other person. So if you want to practice really using FE, what can help is spending time together with people either you are really interested in getting to know them, or you are close to them, or something. Or you should find a reason for yourself, find a reason of why you should be interested in them, even if you don't necessarily have much in common with this person, maybe you have reasons to be interested in them. Like, for example, maybe you could learn something from them. But, like, find reasons to be interested in the people you're talking with so that you stay focused on connecting with them and you don't get bored and start wanting to be introverted and not use extroverted feeling. For connection, you need to be interested in the other person. Like maybe you want to know how they're doing, or maybe you want to know about a certain experience that they had and want to know what they learned or something. But you need a certain amount of interest, and you also need to be, at least at some level, emotionally open and honest with them for genuine connection. But, that doesn't necessarily have to be too personal. It's not like I'm trying to say, like, share your deepest secrets with them or something. It's more like just be open to sharing your emotions in that moment. And it can be as simple as just being like, oh, I like this, or I don't like this, or something like, oh, I think it's great that you did that thing that you did. Or I love that painting there on the wall or something. Or I am concerned about this thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be too personal, as long as you are at least a little bit emotionally open. It's a bit about like listening and sharing, listening to them and sharing your own feelings, basically. So something that can help is, this one might seem a bit obvious, but like spending time with people who have strong extrovert feeling. So I would especially recommend, if you happen to know an ENFJ, spending time with them, because ENFJs are quite similar to us. Only they have stronger extrovert feeling and extrovert sensing. So you can look at them as an example of what's extroverted feeling supposed to look like, and what's an extroverted feeling, extrovert sensing loop supposed to look like. And spend time with people in small groups, okay? Because when we're looking, for example, at extrovert feeling and extrovert sensing, an ESTP would have an extroverted sensing, extroverted feeling loop. So extrovert sensing first and then extrovert feeling, which means they will prioritize extrovert sensing. So an ESTP might enjoy being in big groups of people, busy environments where a lot of stuff is going on. And they might prefer maybe shorter social interactions with people, kind of like going around the room and talking to everyone a little bit and doing physical activities together or something, but kind of keeping it more focused on the SE. But we are supposed to get into extrovert feeling, extrovert sensing loops, which means that extrovert feeling is the most important part, which means it's better for us to be in small groups, at least if we want to focus on extrovert feeling, because FE, extrovert feeling, is the personal function here. Feeling functions are the social functions, right? So FE is more about you want to connect with someone, whereas extrovert sensing is less personal. If you are in a huge group of people, it's going to be really hard to connect with one person on a deep level, And on top of that, we are introverts. So being in a really busy group of a lot of people might be overwhelming for us, and then we might even have a harder time focusing on people. Now, we're going to move on to extrovert sensing. So, first of all, if you do manage to access FE, of course, it can help to also get into extrovert sensing more, because you might get into an FE-SE loop where you are kind of constantly using FE and SE at the same time, being fully extroverted, which is something that can, for example, happen when you are in small groups of people, when you are really focused on a certain conversation maybe, can make you go into an FESE loop where you are both focused on socializing and you are focused on just being in the moment. And that's what extroverted sensing is about a lot. It's just about being in the moment. Just being focused on the world around you, fully listening to someone, for example, and then immediately reacting to what they were saying with the first thing that comes to mind. And, not being controlling about what you're going to say, not thinking too deeply about, oh, I should think of the most perfect answer to what they're saying, just keep the interaction going. That's more what extrovert sensing is about. Not being too perfectionistic or controlling about whatever you're going to do or whatever you're going to say. Just going with the flow. And one thing that can help to develop extrovert sensing is learn to be more interested in the real world. Which, if you're not an INFJ or if you're not an intuitive, might sound really weird, Or maybe if you're an extrovert, why wouldn't you be interested in the real world, right? But for an INFJ, it can be difficult to really be interested in the real world. We are usually interested in many abstract things like theories or planning for the future or imagining how the world could be better in some way or different. Like, why are things the way they are, that kind of stuff. Which means that we like to think and reflect on these things so much sometimes that we can not be too interested in how the world is around us right now. And we might think that theorizing about things is way more interesting than actually doing something. But, of course, if you want to learn to use extrovert sensing more, you need a certain interest, You need to make sure that you get interested in the real world. For example, think about how the real world is important for introverted intuition too. Think about how it is a means to realize your goals. If you have any introverted intuition goals, think about how if you are more connected to your environment and if you don't see any mundane things, any mundane tasks as boring, then you will be able to realize your goals way more easily. And you have to not see intuition and the real world as separate too much. Because if you do, there's a huge danger that you're going to think to yourself, like, I have to be introverted to be in the world of intuition, right? You might think that, and then you might want to constantly escape into that world and not face the real world because you don't want to not be focused on intuition. But you have to realize that you can connect these two worlds. If you, for example, focus on how can I live a life where I am more or less grounded in reality, but I am still also focused on intuition. For example, focus on intuitive visions, but focus not on thinking about the visions or creating them. Focus on realizing them and focus on the real tasks that are going to make them happen. But don't let people tell you shouldn't do that because it's not possible, it's not realistic, or it's weird. Like, just remember that if you do that, you're going to be more connected to the real world because at least you're going to be interested in it. And if the real world's boring to you, you're only going to become more introverted, no matter what other people think. Incorporate intuition into the real world. Maybe live a life that's different from how other people live, or find intuitives and talk with them. And then, secondly, notice when you are using extrovert sensing. First of all, if you really want to use extrovert sensing, you have to realize that if you are using it, it's supposed to be fun. For example, ESTPs, ESFPs, they get energy from interacting with the physical world. and it's fun to them. They constantly want to be moving, they constantly want to be doing things. You have to get energy from it if you are really in an extrovert sensing flow. So you can use it by, for example, doing sports, or maybe walking in nature, being fully engaged in a conversation, going to busy places with a lot of things going on, new impressions, unknown environments, and actually be focused on that. Not be like lost in thought, because if you're going to be really, really lost in thought while doing something, for example, you may be walking around, but you might still be really lost in your own thoughts and really not interested in what you're doing, then you're probably not really going to use extrovert sensing, because you're still going to be using introvert intuition way too much to really be focused on that. And of course you cannot use extrovert sensing for too long anyways, but you should be able to use it sometimes and to kind of be in a flow. So I would say start with doing things that you like to do, because then you might actually get into a flow, and then you know what it feels like to use extrovert sensing. And if you know what it feels like, then whenever you notice that you're using it, you can try to stay in the flow as long as possible, so that you can develop it better and get used to it more as like a habit. So start focusing on doing extrovert sensing related things that you like to do. Recognize what it feels like to use extrovert sensing, and try to focus on your environment, the things around you, or try to focus on your senses, like what are you feeling in terms of sensations, or both, rather than on your thoughts. Try to focus more on the sensory experience. So, for example, if you're outside in nature, you might listen to the birds chirping. You might feel the sun on your face. Or if you're jogging, you might notice how it feels to have your feet like touch the ground. Or if you're walking on a beach, how it feels to have your feet in the sand, Or when you're swimming, like feel the water around you. All these sensory stuff, And then something that can stop you from using extrovert sensing also is being too worried about things, having the tendency to overthink things or being anxious. So, last thing to pay attention to is that if you are frequently worried about things, if you are maybe an anxious person, then try to also fix this problem in some way. Maybe if there are really any problems in your life, to focus on fixing those, or focus on ways to calm yourself down, to be less anxious, maybe some form of therapy. But try to kind of focus on also fixing that problem, because the more often you worry about things or you overthink things, then the less easy it's going to be to focus on the present moment, because you're constantly going to be distracted, by your own worries. So that's also something to think about. Yeah, so those are the main things that I have found helpful in trying to develop these functions. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.